US President Donald Trump has directed officials to rebuild and reopen the notorious Alcatraz prison on an island near San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. The president says the jail will be used to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders.
It sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay, a fortress of rock, iron, and silence, Alcatraz. The name alone conjures images of isolation, madness, and pure evil locked behind concrete walls. It was the last stop for America's most dangerous men. No second chances, no rehabilitation, just time. Endless, punishing time. But now it's back in the headlines. President Donald Trump has proposed something unthinkable, reopening Alcatraz as a maximum security federal prison. In his own words, "If they can't be reformed, let them rot."
Here's an idea I've had, and I guess because the judges, so many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single, think of it, every single person that's in our country illegally. That would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous what's happening. And it's long been a symbol, Alcatraz, of whatever it is.
Tonight, we go inside the most infamous prison in the world, where the worst evil was once buried alive, and may be again. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a statement. It told the world, if you cross a certain line, we will bury you here. Located just over a mile offshore, surrounded by freezing, shark-infested waters, it was considered escape-proof. No inmate ever left alive, officially. For years, it housed the most violent, the most unpredictable, and the most feared. And although it closed its doors in 1963, its legend never died. Now, with President Trump's proposal to revive Alcatraz, that legend may rise again. But before we look forward, we need to go back. The prison that broke men. Alcatraz opened in 1934 and was built to do one thing: crush the spirit. No rehabilitation, no mercy. It wasn't a place for second chances, it was where second chances went to die. The cells were tiny, the rules strict, and the isolation absolute. Inmates were stripped of their identities. Names were replaced with numbers. Eye contact with guards was discouraged. Speaking out of turn meant punishment. Even laughter, if it ever happened, was short-lived. They spent 23 hours a day locked inside cells so narrow they could stretch their arms and touch both walls. The walls were damp, the air was cold, and the silence was deafening. But it wasn't just the physical space that punished them. It was the psychological toll, the endless silence, the biting cold, the view of San Francisco, visible on clear days, mocking them with glimpses of freedom just across the water. Close enough to see, too far to reach. Some inmates went mad. Others withdrew completely, their willpower eroded by monotony and despair. The sounds of dripping water, distant footsteps, and the occasional scream became their new symphony. The daily routines were relentless. Wake up at 6:30 a.m., stand for head count, cold showers under flickering lights, work details in laundry rooms or the prison workshops. Meals were consumed in total silence. Forks scraping metal trays were often the loudest sound at breakfast. The library offered books, but no one ever escaped through fiction. The recreation yard, a concrete rectangle surrounded by walls, allowed for brief exposure to sunlight. But even there, guards with rifles patrolled overhead catwalks. You could feel the sky, but you were never free beneath it. Punishments were severe. The worst of them? The hole. A pitch-black cell in D block, completely soundproof, with nothing but a floor drain and your own thoughts for company. No cot, no toilet, no time limit. Inmates who spent more than a few days inside often emerged shaking, hollow, and permanently changed. Some never recovered. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison. It was a machine designed to grind down the human soul, an experiment in how far the mind could stretch before it snapped. The monsters that called it home. Alcatraz was not for common criminals. It was for the uncontainable, the men whose names struck fear across the nation. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. These weren't just gangsters. They were public enemies, legends in their own time. And Alcatraz was the only place that could contain their chaos. Capone arrived in 1934 under heavy guard. Once the king of Chicago, untouchable, untamed, he was stripped of power and placed in a 5 by 9 foot cell. His disease, neurosyphilis, had begun to rot his brain. He became paranoid, confused, and detached from the empire he once ruled. On Alcatraz, he played the banjo in the prison band, not out of joy, but to quiet the noise in his head. Machine Gun Kelly, once a ruthless kidnapper and killer, found himself sweeping cell blocks and scrubbing mess hall floors. The man who once fired Tommy guns from getaway cars now folded laundry under the eyes of indifferent guards. Alcatraz didn't care about his reputation, it crushed it. Then there was Robert Stroud, the infamous Birdman. A murderer and prison scholar, he spent 17 years in Alcatraz, not raising birds, as he had in Leavenworth, but locked in near total isolation. He was brilliant, dangerous, manipulative, and considered a constant threat to order. His legacy became a cautionary tale about intellect without empathy, but they weren't alone. Alcatraz held spies, bombers, assassins, racketeers, enforcers, and escape artists. Names lost to history, but not forgotten by those who guarded them. Each inmate sent to the Rock knew one thing: this was the end of the line. Because on Alcatraz, nobody was feared. Nobody was special. Every legend became just a number behind bars. The guards who survived it. Being a guard on Alcatraz was no easy post. They lived on the island with their families. Children played within earshot of killers. Wives shopped on the mainland, while husbands watched over murderers. Guards were outnumbered, always at risk, always watching. They had to be tough, but not brutal. One mistake could cost lives. The guards remember the silence, the tension, the unpredictability of the inmates, and the long ferry rides back and forth between duty and danger. Retired guards speak of the psychological toll, of never relaxing, of staring into the eyes of men who had nothing to lose. And now their stories are resurfacing as the island prepares to breathe again. Even the guards had a hierarchy. The toughest posts were near the isolation cells or workyards. Every sound could mean violence. Every glance could start a riot. They weren't just prison officers. They were frontline soldiers in a war of endurance. The escape that shook America. In June 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, did the impossible. They escaped.
How could these prisoners have escaped this super security prison?
It's amazing that these 3 men were even able to get out of the prison complex itself. Alcatraz had the reputation of being the most secure prison in the country.
Using spoons, homemade tools, and dummy heads, they crawled through vents, scaled utility corridors, and vanished into the night. The next morning, the prison woke up to empty beds and silence. The only clue? A raft made from raincoats, found half destroyed on a nearby island. The FBI never found them. The official story: they drowned. But many believe they made it to freedom. Photos, letters, even sightings have surfaced over the years. Their escape became legend, and it was the final crack in Alcatraz's armor. The escape plan was meticulous. Over months, they drilled holes around the vents in their cells. They made tools from stolen spoons and parts from vacuum cleaners. They even built a dummy workshop on the roof of their block to hide their activity. Some say they made it to Brazil. Others claim they died in the bay. But the truth remains unknown. Alcatraz's only successful escape may never be solved. The men left behind makeshift dummies in their bunks, painted papier-mâché heads with real hair taken from the prison barbershop. The deception was so convincing that it bought them hours, enough to climb through the walls and disappear into the night. Years later, the FBI closed the case. But then came a photograph, allegedly taken in Brazil in the 1970s, showing 2 men who bore a striking resemblance to the Anglin brothers. Another lead came from a letter supposedly written by Frank Morris in 2013, claiming he had survived and lived under a false identity. Hollywood picked up the tale. Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood, immortalized their story. But even beyond the screen, the escape continues to haunt American folklore. Were they the only ones to ever succeed, or the only ones we think succeeded? To this day, it's considered one of the greatest prison breaks in history, a symbol of defiance against an institution built to crush the human will. The Shutdown. By 1963, the prison was falling apart. The salt air corroded everything. Plumbing failed. Walls crumbled. And it was too expensive to maintain, 4 times more costly than other federal prisons. Public opinion had shifted. Alcatraz was seen not as a solution, but a symbol of failed justice. The government closed its doors. But Alcatraz never really shut down. It became a tourist attraction, a ghost tour, a symbol of American punishment, a place where the past whispered through every hallway. Over 1.5 million people now visit each year. They walk past the same cells, stare through the same bars, and feel the same chill. Not everyone left Alcatraz when it shut down. Some never did, mentally or spiritually. Survivors of the Rock speak in clipped sentences, haunted, hardened. Some admit the prison changed them forever. Others say it destroyed who they were.
The boat made a wide turn, and then I could see the island. And first I saw the houses down the bottom, and then looked up and the prison was sitting up on top of the island. So that was my first glimpse of Alcatraz. It looked like to me like a French chateau, but I knew that this was no country home. This was going to be my prison for several years. Of course, we all had heard of Alcatraz. It was going to be the end of the line.
One former inmate said, "You don't do time on Alcatraz, time does you." Their stories are resurfacing, memoirs, interviews, testimonies.
Got caught and got caught again and again, but I became better at it each time, sort of trial and error type thing. The problem was the cops got better too, you know what I mean?
And now they're being asked what they think of Trump's revival. Many say no one should go back. Trump's return to the Rock. In April 2025, former President Donald Trump tweeted, "We are going to bring back real justice. Alcatraz will reopen, bigger, stronger, and tougher. The worst criminals in America will be sent there. If they can't be reformed, let them rot."
President Donald Trump has ordered the reopening of Alcatraz prison after being closed for more than 60 years.
Within hours, the internet exploded. Some cheered. Others feared a return to brutalism. Civil rights groups called it unconstitutional. But the plan is moving forward. Blueprints reveal a modernized Alcatraz complete with AI surveillance, offshore containment units, biometric lockdowns, and solitary pods designed to eliminate inmate interaction. Trump's advisors say the new Rock will house terrorists, serial offenders, mass shooters, and organized crime lords. Those with multiple life sentences, no parole, no exit.
So many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single thing of it. Every single person that's in our country illegally, that came in illegally, that would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous what's happening. I mean, it's a sad symbol, but it's a symbol of law and order.
The message? America still has a place to send the irredeemable. Human rights on the Rock. Human rights organizations immediately sounded the alarm. Amnesty International and others warned that permanent solitary confinement violates international law and basic human dignity. The proposed facility allows just 1 hour of isolated activity per day. The rest? Silence, surveillance, stillness. Experts say it's not rehabilitation, it's psychological erosion. Mental breakdowns, hallucinations, long-term trauma, and with no interaction, inmates would be left to deteriorate in darkness.
Imagine what that would do to somebody's psyche, and imagine kind of like, say they are like they've done bad things or like drugs or whatever, or they've murdered somebody or whatever, like they're still a human being. They still need to be treated kind of in a way where like they can be rehabilitated.
Activists have launched protests. Environmentalists argue it threatens the island's heritage, but construction moves forward. As one protester put it, this isn't just about justice. It's about who we become when we forget what justice means. Alcatraz never left us. It waited. Waited in the fog, the silence, the shadow of the Golden Gate, like a relic from a darker age, daring us to remember, daring us to repeat. Now the worst of the worst may once again be locked away on a slab of stone surrounded by deathly waters. A place with no second chances, no forgiveness, just time, solitude, and silence. And this time, escape won't just be impossible. It'll be unimaginable. The doors won't just close, they'll seal. Forever. Because in the end, some evil isn't meant to be rehabilitated. It's meant to rot. If you found this breakdown chilling, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into the darkest corners of justice. And tell us in the comments, should Alcatraz be reopened or stay buried in the past?